As contemporary performers, composers, and researchers of the Negro spiritual, we have benefited from the enslaved who created the folk songs from their deprivation and from the pioneers who had the foresight to understand the importance of these songs and to use them as sources for their new compositions of concert spirituals for vocal performance. From a historical standpoint, the decades following the Civil War saw limited political, social, or cultural gains for African Americans. On the contrast, while Southerners resented every effort to create opportunity for freedmen and their descendants, and for the particular institution designed specifically to limit access to American birthrights to blacks. So whites created hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan and instituted restrictive Jim Crow laws in order to perpetuate the status quo. Okay, oh, I'm going to switch this. I'm not going to be able to use it. Beginning in the late 1910s, African Americans in the arts, humanities, and political and social sciences, this included literature, music, art, theater, and dance, gathered in the Harlem section of New York City to create what became the cultural and intellectual hub of Black life during the post-World War I era. Writers such as Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, popular musicians such as William Christopher Handy and Duke Ellington, painters Aaron Douglas and Jacob Lawrence, and dancers such as Bill Bojangles Robinson and Christine Baker led the way to what became known as the New Negro movement. The early development of the concert spiritual for solo voice occurred during the same time as the Harlem Renaissance, as African Americans in the arts and humanities gathered to spur the growth of literature and art in those communities. Musicians of the era strove to bring the music of their heritage into a new focus. By the time composer Harry T. Burleigh published his first song, Deep River, specifically for vocal concert performance in 1916, he and other composers had created works that drew from the Negro spiritual folk songs. Burleigh published 2 versions of Deep River in 1916, and the third, which is the version most frequently performed today, was written in 1917. This is where I'm going to play my first clip, so you know what, first thing you're going to hear. And Marian Anderson was going to sing it, so you know what to look forward to. Okay, Burleigh published a collection of a dozen spirituals in his album of Negro spirituals in 1917. A review of the recording publication reflected the highly favorable reception the collection received, noting that both recitalists such as Kitty Cheatham, accompanied by Burleigh himself, and Oscar Siegel had enthusiastically included the songs in their programs. While white singers programmed and recorded Burleigh's spirituals into the 1920s, African American vocalists generally were not taken seriously within the world of classical music. And they had a much more difficult time finding labels willing to record them. In 1921, tenor Roland Hayes paid Columbia to make his early recordings of Burleigh's spirituals. And now, second clip. Following is an excerpt from one of these recordings, so you will get to hear Burleigh's setting of Sweet Low, Sweet Chariot by Roland Hayes' early recording of that spiritual. Other black singers either recorded with African American owned labels such as Bloom Special Phonograph Records or Black Swan Records, or they migrated to Europe where opportunities were far more plentiful. Presently, there is only one known recording of Burleigh singing one of his settings. Despite the baritone's disdain for the quality of phonographic techniques in that era, he was persuaded to make the first of what was supposed to be several sessions by Bloom label owner George W. Bloom. Burley, however, recorded the setting of Go Down Moses in 1919. Indeed, Burley's voice was not captured at his best, whether due to the quality of the equipment or the more advanced age of the singer. He was 52 years old at the time that he made this recording. Yet the session and the resulting record captured the composer's interpretation of his music, showing future generations how to sing the old spiritual with power and passion. Burley was the leading voice in the development of concert spirituals, but others pioneered in the area of composition and performance as well. Baritone, composer, and choral director John C. Payne was one of several African Americans who found a more positive reception from audiences in Europe than those in the United States. His home and connection in England supported numerous black musicians and other performers seeking to establish their own professional careers. Payne's recordings of his own spiritual settings and those by Burley were accompanied by pianist Lawrence Brown, who would gain his own reputation as a composer and as an accompanist for bass baritone and actor Paul Robeson. Ethel Waters' biographer, Stephen Bourne, described how Lawrence Brown became acquainted with Robeson. He said, when Paul Robeson stayed with Payne on his visit to London in 1922, he befriended another guest, Lawrence Brown, a gentle, charming man who had come to Europe to accompany Roland Hayes, the concert singer who gave command performance for King George V. According to Robeson's biographer, Martin Doberman, one night at the Paynes, Robeson sang a few songs just for fun. And 30 years later, Larry Brown recalled that he knew at once that it was possible for him to become a great singer. Remember Robeson's magnificent voice, he later sent him the published volumes of spirituals. Ultimately, he would become Robeson's musical collaborator and friend. Brown would also accompany Payne on the piano, and sometimes as a vocalist in concert and in the recording studio. My next example was going to be a performance of Payne singing the spiritual My Way is Cloudy. The spiritual, both as folk music and in its concert performance forms, continued to find a level of fascination in Europe. In Great Britain, famed English composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor drew upon his own African roots, using the spiritual in his piano works, which received international acclaim. Diplomat, educator, and musician Will Mercer Cook traced France's interest in American Negro music to as early as the 1857 comments by a French musician who had traveled the United States. Back in the United States, musicians of the African diaspora slowly found more opportunities available to receive training. Oberlin, the New England Conservatory, American Conservatory of Music, and other white colleges began integrating their music programs by admitting blacks such as American soprano Randye Jones, composer performers John Rosamond Johnson, Clarence Cameron White, William Levi Dawson, and Canadian Robert Nathaniel Dett. Although Jones's professional career seemed to exclude the performance of spirituals, the others drew extensively from that source throughout their careers. And if y'all ever find some Randye Jones performance of spirituals, please let me know. Email me, call me, call me collect, let me know. Johnson, his brother, writer, educator, and civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson, collaborated on the publication of one of the earliest collections of concert spirituals, the Book of American Negro Spirituals in 1925, and the second book of Negro Spirituals in 1926. In addition to a history of the spiritual specifically and the African American experience with music generally, Weldon Johnson explained the intent of the first volume. He states, "The collection here represented is not definitive, but we have striven to make it representative of the whole field of music, to give example to every variety of spiritual. There is still enough material to make it representative, to give example to, there is still enough material new and old for another book like this, and perhaps for yet another." In the arrangements, Mr. Rosamond Johnson and Mr. Lawrence Brown have been true not only to the best traditions of the melodies, but also to form. No changes have been made in the form of songs. The only development has been in harmonizations, and these harmonizations have been kept true in character. And so, as an old-time Negro singer could sing any of the songs through without encountering any innovation that would interrupt him or throw him off, they have not been cut up or operaized upon. The arrangers have endeavored above all else to retain their primitive swing. A professional violinist and composer who studied with British composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor, White became one of the earliest proponents of using the spiritual to develop American national music. He was also a founding member of the National Association of Negro Musicians. Det's musical professional career as a pianist and as a composer of more than 100 works included many of the college choirs he directed, as well as concert spirituals that he wrote for one of his proteges, soprano Dorothy Mader. And one thing I want to add here, as a former student at Bennett College, which was this last school where Det taught and was director of the choir there, even in the years that I was a student there, we didn't do a concert without some Det in that program. And these were all spirituals that he composed specifically for women's voices. So to this day, I still love that music. Composers who pioneered in the creation of the concert spiritual journeyed to Africa and to the southern United States to study the sources from which the spiritual sprang. They wanted to capture the musical and poetic elements that made the spiritual distinctive as folk music within their songs for chorus or solo voice. As with so many other aspects of the spiritual, their use in the creation of art songs was controversial. This is a controversy that composers faced then and continue to address even to the present day. In the realm of classical music, Hayes and Robeson returned to the United States and established themselves in Harlem, where their concertizing brought the spiritual as performed by African Americans into prominence. Hayes, who would become one of the most popular concert performers of his era, made the spiritual a focal point of his concerts. Robeson worked with Lawrence Brown to present what is considered to be the first all-spirituals concert in 1925. The duo presented the sold-out concert of songs by Burley, Avery Robinson, J. Rosamond Johnson, Will Marion Cook, and Brown himself at the Greenwich Village Theater. Shortly after the concert, the pair made a highly successful recording of spirituals. Clip. And the recording would be "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen," set by Brown, as that one of the recordings from that set. So you'll actually get to hear the 1925 recording. During that same year, composer Hall Johnson formed the Hall Johnson Negro Choir. He stated that he wanted to show how the American Negro slaves, in 250 years of constant practice, self-developed under pressure, but equipped with their inborn sense of rhythm and drama, plus their new religion, created, propagated, and illuminated an art form that was, and still is, unique in the world of music. Johnson's choir concertized extensively, presenting both live performance and radio broadcasts within the New York City area, and making their first recording for RCA Victor in 1928. Then in 1930, they sang his settings of spirituals composed for the musical The Green Pastures on Broadway. This success was followed by the Broadway production of Johnson's Run, Little Children in 1933. Between 1935 and 1943, the Johnson Choir was featured in films such as The Green Pastures in 1936, Lost Horizon 1937, and Cabin in the Sky 1943. Johnson and Brown were only two of the numerous composers who wrote concert spirituals with singers such as contralto Marian Anderson, who was described as the voice heard once in a century, had returned to America after a decade of honing her skills as a concert singer in Europe to give a highly successful recital in New York's Town Hall in 1935. She recorded extensively, regularly programming spirituals by Burley, Brown, Hayes, Dett, and Johnson, as well as compositions by Florence Price, William Lawrence, and Hamilton Forrest. Baritone Jules Bledsoe, initial claim to fame was his creation of the role of Joe in the 1927 musical Showboat. I know probably most people are more familiar with Robeson's performances and of course, William Warfield's. But Bledsoe, if you get a chance to hear that recording, and I might just sneak it in there, actually does an extraordinary job of singing Old Man River. And I think you will enjoy it quite a bit. So yeah, I'll stick it in there just because. Okay. Yes, I know it's not a spiritual, but who cares? Okay. His programs combine European art song with Negro spirituals composed by himself, as well as composers such as H.T. Burley and Clarence Cameron White, as well as popular songs, including Old Man River. The baritone singing style reflected the challenge regularly faced by African American classical performers with the difficult task of trying to fit two different worlds. He was expected to project the emotional expression associated with black music, and as a concert singer, he had to cultivate the sophisticated urbane style associated with art music. That he was able to blend the two styles is evident by his successes, but sometimes the quality of his presentation became too forced and affected under the strain. And those of you who are also singers, I think we can understand and empathize with that quite a bit. You know, you're a classically trained singer, and yet you're supposed to somehow sing it like a black person. Yeah, and there are times when that balance just doesn't balance, and it's a challenge. I think that it's a career challenge, at least for most of us. I believe that's the case. New excerpt. This excerpt was going to be Bledsoe's recording of the spiritual Going to Shout All Over God's Heaven. It'll be there. Unfortunately, all too often, recording labels did not identify the composers, but I think, just listening to this recording, this may have actually been his own composition. Again, this is something I'm trying to get an answer to, and so the main thing is getting my hands on the music. And I'm just not sure that he ever actually published his compositions. So, you know, if there's somebody, I'd love to get my hands on a piece of on pieces of his music. So, of course, if anybody has some suggestions, I'm using this as my opportunity to spread the word that I'm trying to get this information. It is really something I would love to include in my research. So I would thank you so much for your help on that front. So I do believe he was the composer of this piece. There's all too many times the composer has not been listed on these recordings. And so, you know, this is one effort that I really want to try to see repaired so that people receive credit for their work. So, you know, I don't have proof that he was the composer, but I certainly, you know, this is one effort that I think would be well worthwhile. Okay, even as the performance of concert spirituals was gaining in popularity, debate intensified about whether the folk songs that served as source material for the concert spiritual should be used in this manner, and what performance practice was appropriate when singing. Zora Neale Hurston was particularly sharp in her criticism of the treatment of folk spirituals by Burleigh and his contemporaries. She decried their efforts to make the spiritual conform to her perception of Western European art song standards. Ethnomusicologist and Burleigh biographer Jean Snyder described Hurston's range of concerns about the use of folk songs, and this is the quote. The spirituals were not solo or quartet material, but more importantly, the creative, interactive process of their continual recreation in traditional oral practice was of their essence rather than incidental. To isolate the melody and supply alien harmonies was not only the worst of violations of our song rendition. Even attempts to reproduce some version of authentic folk harmonies would violate the spirit of the songs by standardizing and smoothing out the characteristic elements. The jagged harmony is what makes it, and it ceases to be what it was when it is absent. The harmony could not be taught. The harmony, its truth lies under training like flowers under hot water. The harmony of the true spiritual is not regular. The dissonances are important and not to be ironed out by the trained musician. Snyder later contrasted Hurston's assessment to that of composer, educator, and musicologist Ollie Wilson. Wilson viewed Burleigh's compositional approach to the concept of spiritual, first in Burleigh's intentional predominance of the vocal line over the piano, the placement of the spiritual's traditional call and response form within the accompaniment, the harmonic adherence in order to provide color to the melodic lines of the original spiritual, and finally the focus placed on the song text far more favorably as a new model for the spiritual, a model that consists of a clearly stylized spiritual endowed with new, carefully constructed elements that shaped the musical content of the spiritual to reflect its composer, arranger's unique reinterpretation of the original. During the 1930s and 40s, Europe became embroiled in another war, making it unsafe for Americans to concertize there. However, more opportunities opened for classically trained African Americans on the operatic stage, on Broadway, and in motion pictures. In 1934, white composer Virgil Thompson premiered his opera Four Saints in Three Acts, using the first all African American cast. Composer George Gershwin was commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera to write an opera based on American themes. His work, based on the Negro spirituals and work songs he heard while visiting the American South, and required a black cast at Gershwin's insistence, was rejected by the Met. which would not bring the opera to its stage until 50 years after the opera's original production. Among the cast of the 1935 Broadway premiere of Porgy and Bess was baritone Todd Duncan and soprano Ann Wiggins Brown in the title roles, with sopranos Ruby Elsie as Serena and Abby Mitchell as Clara. Edward Matthews also created the role of Jake in the original Porgy and Bess cast. I want to conclude, and of course, since my excerpts didn't play, that means I'm getting the conclusion fast, so we got lots of time for questions. The spiritual as folk music continues to hold the intense interest of musicologists and other historians who seek to understand its place in the development of the world's music and of the people who created it. Organizations such as the National Association of Negro Musicians devote extensive resources to the study of the spiritual and to encourage the youth under its membership's tutelage to delve into their musical heritage. Whether you advocate for the use of spirituals as source material for art songs or not, it is hard to challenge successfully the effects of the concert spiritual that have had on the development of American music. The spiritual is currently enjoying a resurgence of interest, especially within, but not limited to, the African American music community. Musicians are studying and performing early concert spirituals, composing and premiering new vocal works based on the spiritual, seeking to reissue out-of-print scores and recordings, gathering at conferences to discuss current research, and demonstrating the performance of concert spirituals at vocal competitions such as the Hall Johnson Spirituals Competition, a biennial event sponsored by the National Association of Teachers of Singers. The long road to, I do want to mention a couple of recordings specifically of the era that I think would be of interest to those of you who are looking for recordings of the Harlem Renaissance era. One is The Long Road to Freedom. It's an anthology of Black music, a multi-disc collection created by singer and activist Harry Belafonte, was published by Buddha Records in 2001. The collection includes roots music from Africa, spirituals, work songs, play songs, songs from the Underground Railroad, and a variety of African American popular songs. The other recording I'm going to mention here is volumes 1 and 2 of Wade in the Water, African American Sacred Music Traditions. The compact disc includes notes by Bernice Johnson Reagan, who also compiled the radio broadcast series from which the recordings were selected. Volume 1 is African American Spirituals, the Concert Tradition. Includes performances primarily by historically Black college choirs, and Volume 2, African American Congregational Singing. Contains recordings of ring shouts, lined hymns, and call and response. And there are original congregational styles as well. Excerpts of songs can be streamed online at Folkways, and then I have the link, and I'll make sure that that's included in the information. Actually, I did have one more recording there, a couple others, but this one I definitely want to make sure I mention if you're looking for recordings of this music from this era. It's called A First-Time Buyer's Guide to American Negro Spirituals. It was released by Primo in 2006. The disc includes first-generation singers and choral groups performing spirituals, plus gospel songs such as Precious Lord, Take My Hand, by father of African American contemporary gospel music, Thomas A. Dorsey. But what I really liked about this collection was that a lot of the singers that I've referenced in my presentation are included in that, as well as some such as Evelyn Dove, who I was not able to reference here, but I think certainly she was very worthy of a listen. So I would suggest if you're looking for that kind of music, that's definitely a recording to start with. At this point, what I guess I will do is open up the floor and okay.
That you are here.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
All of what you're doing and all of what you have done. And so it's an honor to give you this award. It was meaningful to me. I know it's meaningful to you. And you know of her work now. And there's so much, in the program which is recorded. I did talk about her collection. I did talk about her spirituals database, which you've got to go to Facebook. I've got to go to her site also to see and to reference. It's really a wonderful, wonderful contribution. So congratulations, Randye.
And that bibliography in your program, many of us, we get our foundation from her Afrocentric Voices website. She's been in this for a long time. She wrote the book literally, so you want to sing spirituals. This is the lady,
right.
And that's why.
This is a waste of time.
Yeah, it's beautiful though.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now, take your questions.
Okay, I want to share one bit of one statement before I take questions. Then, thank you for I'm honored. I really am. They didn't tell me about this in advance, so I'm sort of at a complete loss of words. But I thank you all so much. Thank you. But I wanted to acknowledge as well that the book "So You Want to Sing Spirituals" would not have been written by Randye Jones had it not been for a conversation that took place between Darrell Taylor, who recommended that Nat's publisher contact me to see if I might be interested in writing the book. So it's his fault. And I'm grateful to say that has also led into, I started the research on the book that's coming out now, but those of you who have tried to publish know how hard it is to get that first thing out. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I said, this other project, as much as I want to finish it today, I got a shot, get my first book published, wonderful. So we'll put this to the side, but that book is finally, it's in production. Hopefully I'll get it back within the next couple of weeks or so and get the indexing done. It will be out hopefully by the end of the year. So wish me well. Okay, questions? Oh, I'm sorry. It would be helpful to tell y'all that, wouldn't it? Okay. Now I'm trying to think of my title in comparison to what they ended up letting me call it. Okay, no, it's recorded solo concert spirituals, 1916 to 2022. So there are almost 6,300 tracks referenced in this book. And so the last one, it got to the point where I finally just had to say stop. I found out about a new title by the daughter of Ralph Abernathy. Oh my gosh. Ralph Abernathy. Okay, thank you. Um, that she had released, but it was done in Japan, and I just didn't find out about it until 2 weeks ago. So that's the last one that, I mean, the first one that's not in the book, but so it's basically right up until, you know, Maria Corley's stuff is in there. So that's how close to the end of this year is actually going to be. So if you're interested in it, I actually have in my thing over here, the publishers, both publishers, are offering discounts, and I have the sheets for them both. There's a 20% discount on the new book that's coming out. So you can go ahead and place the order. I think they are giving you until the 17th of November to be able to use that discount. But you can also go out if you don't want to wait till, if you want to wait till the book comes out, that's fine. Just pay the full 100% and get the book. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm feeling good now that the paper's done. So. Okay. Open the floor, please. Questions, comments. Oh yes, Kathy. Mm-hmm.
And people always ask me, can I sing this? Because I said, I sing Schubert, so you can sing
Take.
this. I said, you just have to be careful about the language and which language you choose to use and, the specificity of the language. So if you're singing Undy Smith Moore's Watch and Pray, which is not a spiritual read, but has that intention, it probably isn't the right thing for you to say. However, when you look back and you read Gene Stein's book, about who sang the spirituals at the beginning, and you just talked about it. How do we deal with that question? Because some people get really touchy about it. We had a huge controversy over Swing Low Sweet Cherry because they were singing it for rugby.
For the bad, but that's a different context.
There was any bad intention behind it, but a lot of people got worked up about it.
Yes.
And I was thinking, well, people are singing the song, they know what it is, and of course the intention isn't right, but is there another way we can have that conversation without getting so worked up about it, so then we get people's backs up and we don't have the conversation? How can we have those conversations so they're useful?
I agree. We need to have the conversation, and we need to keep it cool enough that we can express ourselves with intellect and heart and soul, without getting, without letting that get overcharged. Because I think there are people who are genuinely interested in the music. And I try my best to have conversations with people and explain and I tell them it's my point of view, about the value of the music and whether or not it's something should be sung no matter what your racial background or cultural background. But I also am aware that there are certain songs that I would feel very uncomfortable about asking someone to sing, just like there are certain songs that I would not feel comfortable singing, but I also have to be aware of why. There are certain spirituals where there are references to being enslaved that I would not give someone who has not had the cultural background. I just wouldn't do that. But that's also my opinion. And it's based on trial and error in some respects, because unfortunately the resources are still incomplete about, there have been things that I've honestly had to learn from, oh gosh, I will never do that again, to, this was a really great idea, and I think that's until we can find enough understanding of where the boundaries might need to be when you're dealing with someone. I guess it's just like anything else. Until somebody can explain that in a way that can be generally understood, it's going to be a challenge to work through. But the thing is, it's worth the exploration, and that's where it comes down to.
I always say to people, if you're singing a Schubert song, you go to a German expert about that Schubert song.
Mm-hmm.
If you're singing these songs or singing African heritage art songs, you go to somebody who understands that music, who knows the interpretation of it, and that's the value. And that's a respect you would give to any other genre. So,
Mm-hmm. And I don't remember a single one of my teachers telling me that because I was black, I didn't have to sing German lead. You know. I mean, seriously. So, I feel like as a musician, I am depriving myself of an opportunity for a style of music that is so rich and gives you so much of an opportunity to develop expression by deciding that because I'm not black, I can't sing spirituals. No. Just like because I'm black does not mean that I was born with the natural skill to sing spirituals. I had to learn to sing them, just like I had to learn to sing the German lead. I had to learn, there was a certain way that I'm from North Carolina. I've been other places, so by the time you listen to my voice, you can't tell where the heck I'm from. But, because sometimes the southern drawl slides in there, and sometimes, it doesn't. And Florida State, Florida State, Florida State. But anyway, I'm sorry. Are they playing today? Yeah, I'm sure. About to get their derrieres kicked again, but anyway, whatever. Point is that it's we have to all understand that musical expression is a world music. It's if you don't grow up in the culture, even if you do, that doesn't guarantee that you know the music of the full range of that music. You grow up, you listen to popular music, or you listen to this or whatever, and unless the spiritual was in your home, you wouldn't know it. Doesn't matter what your skin tone is. One of my best friends at Florida State was a young man from Alabama, and I'm saying this to y'all because I don't think you will take it beyond what I intend. God couldn't have been whiter if he had tried. Blonde hair, sort of, and I don't know how he managed to be as pasty as he was from Alabama, but he was. But Lord have mercy, he stood up there and he sang spirituals, and I was in tears. Because he touched my heart and he touched my soul, and that was all I cared about, was that he could sing those spirituals in the way that they were supposed to be sung. Because his cultural background or his training, if it came from his teacher, I congratulate that teacher. But he stood up there and he sang those spirituals like they were part of him. And that's what you try for, no matter what style of music you're singing. I'm sorry, I just unloaded on you, but I hope I gave you something useful. Okay. Hi. I don't know. Gene should be the person who should be having that. But I know he had published plantation songs, and a whole collection of them. So that was something that was always a part of his musical life, as to whether or not he got to publish them extensively or not. Why that particular year, and whether or not it had something to do with his affiliation with oh my gosh, I just suddenly forgot the name of he was one of the original editors for, thank you, and I wonder how much the timing had to do with, Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Okay. Actually, this gentleman here, you raised your hand, I think. I somehow was thinking you were the one who raised your hand. Okay, no problem. Yes.
I think for those who even thought it was a violence more power, we have made a couple of Jean Sanders' book that she made Samuel Coleridge Taylor's version of Deep River quite popular so at the time Harry Berry published his. It was already rolling in a tune throughout the US and some parts of Europe. So when he wrote this piece, many of the singers on Country State wanted to sing it as well.
Yeah, sometimes that's, just all of the things converge at the right time, and that sounds like from what everybody's contributing to this, that sounds like that was just the time. Okay, I think I've still got a couple minutes. I can grab one more question if there, okay, yes.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask you if you could speak on a little bit more in terms of singing, how we can balance that soul and keeping the innate, the imperfections, that grit in a world where, as you said, classical music oftentimes wants to refine our spirituals and make us sound a little bit differently than intended, especially when you come from call and response or, collaborative works.
Mhm.
Speak on that a little bit more.
I can try. No, I think I come from a generation too, so it's kind of, and that's why I say I'm trying at this. I did my undergraduate work, had been at college, but I did not get my first exposure to performing Negro spirituals until I studied with a teacher at A&T State University briefly. It was because at the time, singing spirituals in a concert setting was not considered a part of a vocal student's studies. And depending on the teacher you talk to, 3 minutes, okay, you still might find that issue. So I think what you have to deal with, first of all, is finding someone who's comfortable teaching spirituals. And sometimes that might be you teaching yourself spirituals. I would suggest starting with music that, first of all, has little, if any, dialect. And that's going to sound kind of a contradictory statement, but it's really to give you a chance to work on different elements of singing spirituals. The actual performance practice, of finding the placement of your voice, what richness, what darkness you want to try to present, and still maintain your training, your vocal technique. Then as you start feeling more comfortable about what you're doing to try to sing stylistically, start looking at things that require you to start using the dialect. And, and there are, even Burley has some things that have no dialect at all to very heavy dialect. So you can choose how much to work with, and then slowly but surely build that up to where you're comfortable singing using dialect, and yet at the same time maintaining your classical vocal style. Yeah.
I think as we're talking about Harry Burrow and others who were arranging spiritual, I think we get confused as to what the purpose of the concert spiritual was. Harry Burley, and I'm sure Randy will tell you, originally his goal was to have art songs published. The spiritual was what they had permission to publish. So they wanted to elevate these songs, which is what Neely had a problem with. They wanted to elevate these songs to be at the level of European art songs. So when we start talking about how you're going to present it, Burley and all the others, they wanted them to be presented in a very clean, polished, classical presentation. So it's, I think in some ways it's like apples and oranges. If you want to get the whole soul of what Neely was talking about, Hurston was talking about, she's talking about that raw, genuine, authentic, communal spiritual. And I think that's why she had a problem with Burley, because he was turning it into more of the European tradition. Would you say that was it, Randy?
Yeah, and trying to find that ground where you can present the spiritual as close to the genuine sound as you can, and still maintain it. Yeah. Okay, I've been told I got to go. Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Randy, I'm Alan Henderson.
Hi.
Hey, good to see you.
I was looking at you. I know this face. I've seen this face somewhere.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I got your book here, so I'm gonna put them over on the table.
Okay.
With some flyers.
So you don't have to worry about it anymore. Thank you. I have no idea about anything here. I'm just doing the live stream, so I'm not familiar with UCI's.
Do you know who does?
Maybe the guy that was in charge of the theater.
Okay, I'll talk to him.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think the problem was we couldn't plug into whatever computer was here.
Yeah,
That's
because it's all locked up.
Yeah.
Okay, I will talk to Sheila.
Okay.
I'll see if because we have a few presentations that do have slides. She luckily, these two this morning luckily did not.
Yeah.
But we need to get that figured out. So.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And then
I enjoyed the drive, but I was wiped out.
You've been driving.
I drove.
All right, well, I'll wait till you get the flyers out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to talk to you sometime about ornamentation as well, because you never seen anything in circle, but not all people like that, you know.
It's just individual.
That's what I said.
I use her for as a guide.
Because she can sing and everything. I think she kind of clean, but Leontine was the one. She can sing. I teach you Manchester, but I never know.
sorry.
You have to
I'm gonna go. Yeah, because I have to drop out.
Yeah, that's okay. Then I'll see you.
Okay, sounds good.